Okay, so we're in Parsha Tetzave, and you shall command, and probably be somewhat meandering here through a few different thoughts, a couple different directions, um, maybe even more. but the principal place here is kind of a number of the thoughts stem from this right here. So Moses says, "Thou shalt make holy garments for." God commands Moses to say that he shall make holy garments for Aaron, his brother, for glory and for beauty. A number of things we can take away from the statement. But before even doing that, one of the things that's noted by many Jewish commentators is that this is the only parsha outside of the book of Deuteronomy where Moshe's name does not appear at all. Though Moshe or Moses is completely present throughout this text, including here at the start. It says, let's see. Not here at the start, back at the start of the Parsha. Sorry. Down here. And you shall command the children of Israel that they bring pure olive oil. So the person speaking here, what's speaking here is God. God saying, and you. Well, who is you? You is Moses. So everything here is by context, Moses is completely embedded throughout this parsha, but he's not overtly mentioned by name. There are a number of reasons suggested for that. We may explore some of that. One of the chief ones is going back to when Moses besieged God and he said, essentially, may my name be blotted out of this book for the sake of the people after they had sinned. That God refused that. But some of the commentators say sometimes statements of that magnitude are not without some effect. In other words, by his mere suggestion of that, God ultimately refused them. It wouldn't serve his purposes. It's not the way it works. But at the same time, he says, here's a little bit of consequence, so I'll blot your name out of just this parsha. That's one of the things that's suggested for that, and it may have some merit. But again, here, one of the focuses here is Moshe. He, at his core, represents one side of a coin, and you have this sort of coin, if you were, in Israel. It's two functions that are very valuable. And on one side you have the prophet, the other side you have the priest. And Moses principally represents the side of the prophet, where you have Aaron, the priest. Now we can make debate whether Moses could have had both offices if he would not have refused God's command all the way back when God was sending them to free the children of Israel out of Egypt. He said, basically refused God and said, God, I'm slow of speech, I can't do this. And God said, fine, I'm sending your brother Aaron. So theoretically, what if Moses would have said, all right, God, let's go? Maybe Aaron would have came still, maybe not. Or maybe Aaron would have came and he would have just been along for the ride. And this would be Moses' duty, maybe not. It just goes to show, though, that sometimes, again, our actions have consequences. All right? Not necessarily bad consequences, but sometimes maybe we lose out on everything we could have gotten because our short-sightedness, or our feelings of insecurities sometimes even. So back here to the main element of the text, one of the things here is the focus of this parsha is the priesthood. Okay. And the ultimate role of the priesthood is it keeps its focus is more on the mundane. The prophet's more focused on, shall I say, the historical side. It's more focused on the cohesiveness of Israel. It's more focused on charity. It's more focused on judgment. It's more focused on these things. Where the priesthood, it's not that they don't teach about these things. It's not that that's not central to them, but they're more. The prophet is the here and now, looking towards the future potential, where the priesthood is just looking towards the cycle, keeping on the same path that, their days, holy days, holiness in time. Their primary function was at the temple. The prophet was out among the people, going in here and there. The people came to the priest. The prophet went to the people. The priesthood's goal was, again, to keep people in the cycle, to keep things moving through the calendar year, keep things, facilitating things such as the sacrificial system, and keeping these things on target. And so, again, we see these elements here, and it's through those things where we have holiness, the set apartness. Comes through the priesthood. The idea of the priesthood, we are distinct, we are set apart, right? And in this, again, the ultimate element here is we have this emblem as the high priest. His garments are for glory and for beauty. So for glory or honor, for it's a wondrous thing even. And the high priest becomes a center emblem for the people. He's the one that bears the sins of the people, right? And he facilitates before God. And so these elements can teach us a number of things. So one of the things that we should remember is, according to God, there, Mount Sinai, we're to be a kingdom of kings and priests, right? So we can't just look at this and say, well, this is just about the high priest. It's only relevant to him. No, there's element. How is this relevant to us? If we're to be a kingdom of priests, how is this relevant to us? So there's a number of principles we can learn here. One of them I kind of want to focus on is says, and thou shalt make a plate of pure gold and engrave upon it, like the engravings of a signet, holiness to the Lord, or holiness to Yahweh. Okay, and it says, you shall put upon it a blue lace, that it be upon the meter, upon the forefront it shall be, right? And it shall go upon his forehead, that Aaron may bear the iniquity of holy things, which the children of Israel shall hallow in all their gifts, and it shall always be upon his forehead, that it may be accepted before Yahweh. So it's always to be on his forehead, that he shall bear the iniquity, right? So this plate of gold is Tziz, right? Tziz. Could be translated as flower, which is kind of interesting, or petal. So it's not just a plate. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. If we go over here, this is to have on it a cord of teklet. Okay. That's kind of interesting. If you're still not following me, understand that Tziz is the base of Tziz. What you put on the 4 garments of your clothes. And guess what? It has a thread of blue. Interesting. So when we talk about Tziz, somehow they are connected here to this and also connected to holiness. One of the things with being a thread of blue, I mean, blue, again, when we look at the Torah, when we look at these things, you just see a thread of blue. Understand that the priesthood and the prophets and these people were given these instructions about the details of these things. The text puts it in there. It puts it in there, so then you see this and you go, why? Well, who are you going to ask? You go to the priest. You go to the person that knows. What is this? What is this about? He would tell you. Well, blue. One of the things with blue is connected to teklet, specifically often associated with sky blue, sky, the heavens, heavenly things, right? Whereas you see these things constantly repeated throughout the text, especially here. You have red, you have blue, and you have purple, right? It's 3 colors all over here. If blue is heavenly things, red then we see as being associated with the earthly things, right? How do we know this? Well, because, there's blood, it's associated with blood. There's life in blood. Blood is necessary for material life. In most instances, more than that, they're just symbolically. When we look through Jacob and Esau. What's Esau? He's red. Edom, right? Yeah, he's red. And what is his characteristics? Animal, material, earthly. Okay, so it's not like it's a stretch to just say these things. So here we have blue associated with the sky. We have red associated with material things. And what is purple? Purple is blue and red put together. Right? And so when we talk about garments here, one of the things here, we talk about garments. Garments are important, okay? And they can be for honor or for glory and for beauty. There's nothing wrong with this. Maybe talk a little bit about that more in a minute. That's not the main thrust of my point here is when we look at things, we could go back to the garden, okay? And in the garden, you had Adam and Eve, and they were naked. Okay, whether you could go in the whole garments light thing, except, we could talk about some of those elements, that's good. But principally speaking, they were naked and they didn't know. They were not aware. They were not focused on these things. They were focused on the soul. They saw each other as divine beings, not as natural beings. So they were not aware of their nakedness. It just wasn't in their thought process until they ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and then their perspective fell. The perspective fell more to the material world and the material things, and they became more aware of these things, and then they saw what? That they were naked. And so once they saw that they were naked, they were lowered more to the animal level. This is a bigger issue, right? From the animal perspective, that launches into a whole new avenue of things. And so what? They were given garments to cover that, right? Why? To put the emphasis back on the 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 deeper things, to cover that, so the focus could then go back to where it should be, the deeper elements of a person, not just their physical body. Okay. So then we have purpose, but this also teaches us something else. So again, with purple's a mixture of this, right? It's a mixture of blue, heavenly things, and earthly things. And this, God created a material world, and God is essentially himself enclosed in the material world is the garments of God. God is not naked here, he is covered in the material world. And we see these deeper elements even when we talk about Yeshua, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. It was enclosed, is really what that is. Became fleshy and clothed. Well, the Word of God already had garments. The whole world is, again, sustained and held together by the Word of God. The Word of God is embedded within that. And so we have these kind of notions, these deeper notions, even within the notion of the high priest. He's given these garments, right, special garments, to enclothe him, just like God himself is enclothed. And one of the things here, too, is God didn't create this material world to annihilate it. It has a purpose, right? And again, if in the world of red, you have it goes for its own purposes. The material world, if is solely on its own, it goes to its own purpose. If you're solely in the heavenly mindset, it has no purpose. If you bring them together, then its purpose becomes to serve the heavenly purposes, the original design, the Creator. And you kind of have that here. So, let's see here. I think this might serve. Here, you have an example of what this garment looked like here. Okay. The breastplate and the turban. Here's some individual garments, elements of the garments. The threads. This is the metal plate, the Tziz, if you will. These are the pomegranates there and the bells. Now, in Judaism, it said that various elements of these garments atone for different elements. So this crown or that plate, the Tziz, it's said to atone for arrogance. Okay. Arrogance and insolence. Those kind of concepts are generated from the head, if you will. You know, those arrogance and insolence are more tied towards the will, a person's will. Generally speaking, why do we say that? Well, a more meek person is generally not arrogant, and that means they're someone who has a more meek spirit. Their will is not plugged in. Their will is not. They're not necessarily the type of person to impose their will on others. Yeah, why is this? Yeah. What's going on here? Always some kind of issue. Well, see how far I can get, because exactly I'm not sure what's going on here. Just replace this. So anyway, well, maybe I better pull that up here so I can watch that. Okay, so yeah, those things stem from, again, the person's will, which is generally above the intellect. And that in the list, when you go through the list of these garments here, that's actually the eighth one, which is has no small amount of significance. 8 always represents something transcendent, right? Something beyond the norm. So when we look at the Tziz, and we look at what it said to atone for arrogance, insolence, and these sorts of things, there's various places in the Talmud where it identifies the Jewish people as sort of a brazen, arrogant people. That God himself calls them what? Stiff-necked, right? What's a stiff-necked person? This is somebody that's a strong-willed person, okay? So one of the elements of this is saying, one of the elements here with this is saying, it's not saying this is bad, but only when it's used properly, right? So you can't say all arrogance, all insolence is necessarily bad, or this whole brazenness is bad, but it's got to be used for proper purposes. And I mean, we could even bring in this life of Yeshua. Yeshua is very, very meek, humble, came. But yet, there are many points throughout the Gospels where he shows a lot of brazenness, what some would call arrogance. Yeah, right, turning tables over, lashing ropes as whips, calling somebody a brood of vipers, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites. These sorts of things, they require a certain level of, say, chutzpah, right? A certain level of that character. It can be good, right? We tend to look at these things, all these things, that's all bad. That's not humble. That's not meek. There's a time for meekness, and it has its place, and there's a time it's time for everything. So one of the lessons of this is saying that when it comes to even specifically holiness, this is tied to holiness, right? That sometimes for holiness to the Lord requires a certain level of this brazenness, but used correctly for God, for his things. It's tied to zeal, what we call zeal, passion. These things, one of the lessons of this is this. Same thing with the Tzith, right? Why is the Tzith? Tzith is to remember the commandments of God. What is one reason we could say the Tziz here is tied to Tzith is, again, to remember the commandments of God and to be zealous, to tie our will to that for what? Holiness to the Lord, holiness to Yahweh. Now there's also public and private aspects of this as well. And, part of the public aspect, this is emblazoned on here. Everybody can see. This is not a question. This is not hidden. The high priest is out there during this period with his garment on. It's holiness to the Lord. The whole world can see that this dedication, this purpose. Okay. The other aspect too is, says here, and it shall be on Aaron's forehead that he may bear the iniquity of the holy things, right? It should be on his forehead that it's acceptable before Yahweh. Well, one of the times he's in this and he's using this is when he goes into the presence of God. And in essence, there is and as we talk about Zechor, remembrance, there's this element of remembrance that when he approaches God, this is right on his face. And he's approaching God. When we're talking about Yeshua, we're talking about face to face. He's face to face here with God. And right blazing across there, it's like, remember, God, holiness to you. Don't destroy us. Don't smite us for our iniquities. As we return here to you, I'm here. I'm standing here, and you remember that, please. What is our identity? Because what? As we go through the layers of garments, they're all built on each other, and one of them, beyond the breastplates, is the shoulders. And on his shoulders, he bears the nation, right? 6 on one side, 6 on the other. And he's saying, this nation that I'm embodying here as I stand before you is holiness to you. Please remember that as I come before you here with their iniquities. Remember, you're the one that, this is your idea. Just throwing that out here before you smite me. These notions are here within this. I don't know why this battery is not charging properly. Whole other issue, of course. See how much time I can draw out of this. Okay, then. So the other notion here is for honor and beauty that's worth talking about. Is what we call zinut, modesty. So garments are for modesty. And modesty is for men as well as women. It's often talked about mostly towards the sense of women. Modest dress is important for men and women, but we already know that it says there that these clothes are for glory and for beauty. So from this we can take away, if the high priest, and he represents the people, you end up throughout time this ascetic notions that you must wear like the most plainest thing, and that's it's gone.